Hey guys, welcome back. I hope that you've had a good day so far, and I wanted to show you what I need you to put in your notebooks today. So if you are watching this video, then that means that you've already finished the first part of the material that you have been left for the day, and now we're going to move on to adding information to our notebooks that will go into the next page. So if you are in my first block, then you're going to be working on page 44 in your notebook, and if you're in my second block, then this is going to be page 36. So just make sure that you're on the correct page. The page that we just did in front of it was division of decimals. So we're going to start with our learning targets for today. The first learning target that you need to write down is I can divide decimals. So I'll give you just a minute. If you need to pause, feel free to pause and go back and write down whatever you need into your notebook. The title of today's lesson is Division of Decimals. So I do want to remind you that everything that we've worked on so far has been division of decimals by whole numbers, but today we're going to be working on what do we do if we have two decimals, a decimal dividend and a decimal divisor. So we're just going to start with an example, and that example looks like this. And the problem that you see is that we have not only a decimal dividend, but we also have a decimal divisor. And when we learned how to multiply by whole numbers, we didn't learn any facts for decimals. So there are some steps that we have to follow. So I'm going to ask you to write these down as I write them down. And again, feel free to pause the video and copy down these steps. So there are some steps that you need to know. The first step that you're going to do if you have a decimal divided by a decimal is you're going to move the decimal in the divisor until it is a whole number. So I just want you to write down the instructions or the steps right now, and then we'll go through the example together. So once you've moved the decimal in the divisor until it's a whole number, the second step is you're going to move the decimal in the dividend the same number of places. And this is a very common mistake that students make, and I'll show you some mistakes that they make as we go through our notebook. The third step is you put your decimal into your quotient and divide. So once you've gone through steps 1 and 2, you pretty much are finished and you can just work the division problem. So again, if you need to pause the video and write this information in your notebook so you see how mine looks, and then you can replay the video. We're going to do this example in this blank spot that's right here. So the first step, of course I didn't write it down, but the first step would be that I would have to set up my problem. So my dividend is 2,400, it goes inside the house. And then my divisor is 600, so it goes outside the division symbol. So this is what it looks like. So step 1 says move the decimal in the divisor until it's a whole number. Well, the divisor is this number. So if you look at that, I would have to move that decimal 2 places, and that would become a 6, a whole number 6. So step 2 says you move the decimal in the dividend the same number of places. So I moved this one 2, so I need to move this one 2. So this is my new problem. Notice that I took off the 0 here and I took off these zeros. Those are placeholders now. We don't really write lead zeros, and so it's pointless to put those in because I can't divide with those. So this is what we have currently. Now I'm going to divide. So my third step says I'm going to put my decimal into my quotient, and then I'm going to divide. So I'm going to take my decimal, I'm going to put it right here, and then I'm going to divide. So 6 will not go into 2. Remember, we've talked a lot about holding your place, but 6 will work with 24, and that goes exactly 4 times. And so 6 groups of 24. Once I get to this 0, remember that means that my problem is finished. So 24 hundredths divided by 6 hundredths is equal to 4. And I know you're probably thinking, how can that be? How can you have a small number like 24 hundredths and divide it by 6 hundredths and end up with 4? Well, if you think about, you have 24 little blocks like we did with our modeling activity earlier this week. And then if we cut out 6 hundredths or 6 little blocks, we would end up with 4 groups. So this is kind of working backwards from what we did with our modeling the other day. Once you're finished with this, we're going to do some additional examples in our notebook. We're just going to talk about some what ifs. So here is an additional example that we are going to work on together. Again, I do expect you to be putting these in your notebook as you're watching this video. So this is what this one looks like. 16 3/10 divided by 25 hundredths. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this problem up. I'm going to put my dividend inside the division symbol and my divisor outside the division symbol. And then what you're going to notice is that I have a decimal divisor. So my rules tell me the first thing I have to do is move the decimal in the divisor until it's a whole number. So I'm going to take this number and I'm going to move my decimal 2 times. That makes this a 25. Here's a common mistake that students make. Because I moved this one 2 times, a lot of times students think that I only get to move this one 1 to make it a whole number. But because I moved this one twice, I also have to move this one twice. But I'm out of numbers. So what would I need to do? At this point, I would need to add an additional place, and then I fill in that hole with a 0. So this is what my problem looks like. 1, 6, 3, 0, and my decimal goes right behind it. Then I'm going to put my decimal into my answer and I'm going to begin to divide. So again, I expect you to do this with me. 25 will not work with 1. 25 will not work with 16. 25 will fit into 163 6 times. That gives me 150. When I do 3 minus 0, I get 3. And 6 minus 5 is 1. I have 13 remaining. I'm going to bring this 0 down into place. And now I'm going to say, how many times would 25 fit into 130? Well, that would fit 5 times. And that's 125. So 130 cannot do that. So 10 minus 5 is 5, and 2 minus 2 is 0, so I'm only left with a 5. Well, now I'm out of numbers, but I have a remainder here, and I can't write remainder 5. A lot of times that's what you would do, but we want our answer in decimal form. So I'm going to annex one of these zeros, and now I have a 50, and 25 will fit into 50 exactly 2 times. And now that I have a 0, that means I'm finished. So 16.3 divided by 0.25 gives me an answer of 65 2/10. Okay, we're going to do 2 more examples. So here's our second example. So we're going to write this problem down. We're going to set it up. 0.4 is my divisor. 328 thousandths is my dividend. Step 1 says I have to move my decimal in my divisor until it's a whole number. So it becomes a 4. Because I moved this one time, I only get to move this one time. So again, I'm not going to move it all the way to the end. I'm only going to move it one time. I take away that front lead 0. My decimal is now here between my 3 and my 2, so this becomes my new problem. Now I'm going to put my decimal into place, and I'm going to begin to divide. 4 will not work with 3, so I'm going to go ahead and put a 0 there. You could put an X. 4 will work with 32 exactly 8 times. Drop my 8 into place. And 4 will work with 8 exactly 2 times. Because I have a 0, that means I'm finished. One final example that we're going to work on. And that one looks like this. That is 9 5/10 divided by 15/100. So we're going to start by setting this up. 9 5/10 goes inside, and the 15/100 goes outside. I know that my expectation is I'm going to move this one 2 places to make it a whole number so that my decimal's behind it. If I moved this one 2 places, I also have to move this one 2 places. So I'm going to fill that hole with a 0. And this is what I have. So now 15 will not work with 9. So up above that 9, I'm going to put a 0. But before I do that, I almost forgot. Let's put my decimal into my answer. And 15 will not work with 9. 15 will work with 95. If you don't know your 15s, remember we've talked about you can come over to the side of the paper and you could work them out. You could just list 15 plus 15 is 30, plus another 15 is 45. You can make guesses. You could just choose a random number and say 15 times 3 and see what you get. So I know that 15 is going to fit into 95 6 times. Because 15 times 6 is 90. So 95 minus 90, 5 minus 0 is 5. And then I bring down my 0. The closest that I can get to 50 with 15 is a 3. And 3 15s is 45. So 50 minus 5 is 5. Well, I have a 5 remaining, but I'm out of numbers. So at this point, remember, we're going to annex one of those zeros. Drop it down into place. And some of you have already clued into what's going to happen here. We already know that the closest that we can get to 50 is 3 times, and that's 45. Well, the problem is this. I have 50 minus 45. Well, that gives me a 5 again, and I'm left with a 5. If I need to show you, I can annex another 0. And the closest I can get to 50 is 3 again. So you begin to see this pattern that develops. 50 minus 45 is going to leave me with 5. This, we realize, is going to be a repeating decimal. So if this is a repeating decimal, then I'm going to write it like this. 9.5 divided by 15/100 is 63 decimal 3. And as you can see, the 3 after the decimal is what begins to repeat. So I'm going to express that using what we call bar notation over the 3. So this is what my notebook looks like. I didn't add this answer in, so I can go back and do that. And we figured out that one is 82/100 so that it looks the same. This is what my notebook looks like. If you want to take just a few minutes and make sure that your notebook looks like mine. today is the 27th of October, so you'll need to date it, and then you'll need to number your date or number your page. Again, if you are in my first block, this